Good evening and talofa lava to all our viewers out there today tuning into our special offer today. My name is Therese, Kiely, and along with my supervisor, Dr. Nicholas Thompson, we have a 30-day money-back guarantee of the supplement Get a Life. Are you tired of comparing how strong your eyebrow game is to everyone online? Do you get sick of trying to get more followers on Insta for your hashtag #NoFilter selfies? Our supplement today, Get a Life, will for sure help you get a life. Perhaps you can tell that sometimes I get frustrated with the way social media is used sometimes. So that's why for my honours dissertation in theology, I decided to combine my passion of working with young people, belonging to church community, and being frustrated with pointless online exploits. I'm focusing on young Catholic Aucklanders' experience of social media and how consistent this is with a Catholic understanding of Christian community. This compares positive and negative aspects of belonging to these two types of communities, motivations young people have in belonging to church and in using social media, and how these overlap. Oh, we're a bit cut off there. So why is this important? It's important because my generation is the first to use social media extensively, and I'm ultimately trying to find some kind of answer to what young adults seek and obtain in belonging to community. Although I may be focusing on Catholics and navigating online and reality with religious belief, I argue that finding acceptance and belonging are what all young people seek, especially in a time when you're constantly pushed to portray yourself in certain ways online. So how am I going to do all this? What I'm doing is a branch of practical contextual theology, and this is applying theology in everyday situations. Stephen Bevins offers this basic praxis model that you see up here, which is based on reflection and action and is rooted in the experience of the people. So the first step is describing the experience of young people. The second is completing a context analysis by dialoguing with non-theological literature. And the third is dialoguing with tradition and scripture. And the fourth is making a critical reflection based on these previous steps. Then conclusions are offered in practical ways of looking ahead to the future. So trust me, theology is not such a waste of time as many people may think. So to the context analysis. There were three key themes that came up in there, and they were identity, connectedness, and narcissism, which I can never spell right. Identity is significant as young people have different social networks online and offline, meaning that self-presentation is a critical balancing act. Pierce and Bobkowski come from a sociological standpoint, and they say that social media users in more secular countries refrain from expressing religious identity due to fear of judgment or starting debates. Connectedness is significant as some authors argue that a pseudo-spirituality can be found in belonging to online community. And a study of youth on social media in China also found that social media can satisfy needs of affiliation in times of distress. Finally, there are different kinds of narcissism found online, and social media can bring out narcissistic tendencies among us and can reward those who are clinical narcissists, like this fine-looking dog up here. This results in attention from a variety of superficial relationships and highly managed presentation of self. So just to remind you where we're at, the next step is dialoguing with tradition and scripture and the field data which I've been collecting. So I've been carrying out anonymous questionnaires in different Catholic parishes around Auckland after Sunday Mass for 16 to 33-year-olds. Now, I don't have any Whittaker's chocolate here like I gave to the participants, but if you'd like to participate in an activity, then I would really appreciate it. So I'm going to ask you two questions, and if you say yes, please stand up where you are. And if no, then just stay seated and give me a wave, okay? So the first question is, do you think people become more popular in reality if they continually post about themselves? Ooh, yeah. Okay, question number 2. Is there a difference between posting a photo you took of yourself, like a selfie, and a photo which someone else took of you? Is there a difference between posting a selfie and a photo which someone else took of you? You're following the trends. It's great. Okay, so those are two of the less personal questions that I did in my questionnaire. And in the last 2 months, I collected 327 responses, and I could have got more if the ethics committee hurried up and gave me a response. So the two theologians I'm using are Pope Francis and Jean Vanier, and the scripture passage I'm using is the Good Samaritan from the Gospel of Luke. So when Francis visited Cuba last month, he said, "I would dare to say that at the root of so many contemporary situations is a kind of radical loneliness that so many people live in today, running after the latest fad, a like, and followers on any kind of those social networks." And in other places, he says that online connections shouldn't prevent meaningful relationships. It's in accepting oneself and acting out of interest to form meaningful relationships rather than building up one's personal reputation, which leads to acceptance of others. So can everybody copy me? Yeah. So imagine that, but 100 times louder, and that's how mental some Catholics are about Pope Francis. So for Vanier, community is how to suffer with others in their joys and sorrows. So at the same time, you grow in love for oneself and God by not avoiding your own brokenness or pretending to be someone that you're not. Only when you're able to accept who you are, that you are unconditionally loved by God for who you are. Oh, got that? Francis discusses the Good Samaritan from Scripture, which I argue underpins both theologians' comments. So Jesus says that we should love God and neighbor as we love ourselves. So someone asked Jesus, well, who is my neighbor? So Jesus tells this story. After two priests passed by a severely injured man, a Samaritan stopped and cared for him. Francis emphasizes a culture of encounter on the digital highway. He concludes that the church community isn't called to deliver a flood of religious messages, but to listen and to help others find meaning in their lives. Thus, with these in mind of the data, my two hypotheses I will make to use my critical analysis are: frequent church attendees are less likely to post content about themselves on social media for personal popularity gain, and they find a balance between social media and faith communities. So just to give you a bit of context, in the 16 to 33-year-old age bracket, the bulk of Sunday Mass goers are 16 to 23-year-olds and are predominantly Asian or Pacific Islanders, with some Europeans and a smattering of other ethnicities. The older ones usually either leave Christianity altogether or go to a Pentecostal church, and they may return to get married and want their children baptized, most of the time genuinely, and others just to get into the Catholic education system. So there were three groups of questions in my survey, and the first was church, the second was social media, and the third was how these overlap. So in the first section, one of the funny responses for negative experiences of church was, "Mate, there's too much praying." Yes, there is too much praying. Other than that, 1/3 of respondents wrote about judgment from others in the church, hypocrisy, and not understanding the scripture. As you'd hope, the positives far outweigh the negatives, with 90% writing about finding profound peace and feeling loved and supported by the community and God. In the second section on social media, it's predominantly used to keep connected with friends and family, but about 3/4 of respondents wrote about huge judgment from others and bullying. Others also wrote about being annoyed at others who post too much. One said, "Some people actually post really interesting things." Others post sandwiches with their faces next to them. So in the third section, the slightly unexpected trend so far is on the question, does your faith affect your actions on social media? There's a closer distinction between yes and no, with about 65% yes and 35% no. Those who answered yes write that faith is a guideline in all aspects of life, but some also said that they don't want to post churchy things as a lot of people judge them for it and look down on them, especially here in New Zealand. Those that answer no write that social media is completely separate from faith and that their faith is too strong. So interpretation of the question is different. Now we're at the final stage of the methodology, the praxis. So I'm still analysing the data, but it will include recommendations for the church leaders and individuals. So this will be something like deleting or restricting access of social media friends who don't really mean anything to you. Be involved in church activities to develop a sense of fulfillment and belonging. And when you meet up with your friends, put your phones in the middle of the table and don't check them. And sometimes priests need to include in their comments better relationships in social media in their sermons. Generally, churchgoers tend to already have a strong sense of self-worth with the belief that they are loved and created in the image of God. Thus, my praxis is not so much helping people with self-esteem issues, but how to make social media meaningful and a way to enhance real-life relationships. So yes, the study is for my own research, but I hope that this will voice the opinions of young adults in the church and be useful in real local parish situations, as I hope to present this research back to them. Ultimately, as Pope Francis says, may the light we bring to others not be the result of cosmetics or special effects, but of our being loving neighbours to those wounded and left on the side of the road. So let's all go get a meaningful life. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I'm just wondering if the questions that you have asked the students or whoever have participated in the survey or whatever, have you chosen the answers yourself, or have they responded some random answers and you have categorized them? And
So,
what you just said, like you just said something like A, B, C answers.
So I let them write whatever they wanted to write, and it's taken me about 2 weeks just to categorize all those answers. And I'm not really useful. I don't really use Excel that much, so it took me ages. So luckily, my parents are accountants, and they can help me. Yeah. Yep.
You commented that a lot of the young people were either Pacific Island or Asian. The difference between the Pacific Islanders and the Asian responses?
Differences within the Pacific Island responses.
Between Pacific Islanders and Asian responses?
Yeah, I would say so. I think the Pacific Islanders, they didn't really write as many negative things about the church, just because I think it's so entwined with the culture. And again, when I say Asian, I mean, I know it's a really broad category, and that would include people that consider themselves Indian and Filipino. Indians and Filipinos, they're like, no, I'm not Asian, I'm Indian or Filipino. So that's probably the difference that I'd say. But yeah. Yeah.
I'm very interested in this correlation between if someone's religious and the fact that they are likely to post selfies on Facebook, and whether or not that actually implies that they are, they are very happy with themselves, or they feel very confident in their own, personal place in society, or whatever it is. But I'm curious how that fits into your research. This idea of self-identity.
I think maybe about 20% of respondents wrote about that self-worth kind of thing and felt that they were comparing their lives to other people because they weren't sort of happy about themselves. So when I say the majority of people, they're mostly happy with themselves. And people did write about they wanted to share positivity, whether it was not necessarily about their Catholic faith or their Christian faith, but positivity to share that. So that was sort of the general message that people wanted to share. So that did come into it, yeah. But definitely there were some people that felt that they were comparing their lives to each other or how strong their eyebrow game was. Yeah.